text. So when our kids are born, they're born into a family that is about relationships, but they don't know anything about them. So they have to learn everything about relationships based on the one they established with their parents. And that relationship becomes the blueprint for them as they move out into a bigger world. So it wasn't just that I was going to be in a relationship with a child. It was that this child was then going to translate everything that was happening and extend that out into the world. I love that notion. It speaks to me in a really deep way. The second was that children want to be independent, that there's a yearning deep inside of all of us to master our environment.
Amen.
And
Yeah.
right, and that kids don't need to be talked into pursuing independence, but they need opportunities to develop and master self skills, social skills, and life skills. And as their parents, we have a chance to create environments in which they have 18 years in which to practice becoming independent and our ability to support them. I loved the idea that if you introduce children to a relationship that was built on dignity and respect, that they would not only give it to other people, but they would demand it from other people, which meant that as my children spent more and more time outside of the home, they would be much more savvy in terms of gravitating towards people who also embodied those qualities and would distance themselves from people who did not. So, in other words, they would be able to negotiate and navigate relationships with their peers in a much more thoughtful and savvy way.
And yet you were able to do this without lecturing them about that, I gather.
Yes, absolutely. So, one of the ideas that I took from Adler and kind of tweaked a little bit was this idea about feeding the weed. As parents, we tend to focus on all the things our kids do that drive us nutty. And when I work with parents, I say, just write your list out of all the things your kids do that make you want to pull your hair out. And it's a sizable list.
Yeah, sure.
And we tend to focus all of our attention on those pesky behaviors. And we go to the store, the bookstores, and get online and read blogs to learn what strategies we can use to minimize those pesky behaviors. And they include timeouts and counting and punishing and bribing and consequencing. But what happens is we end up feeding those weeds, and those pesky behaviors get more embedded in our kids. They tend to grow, they tend to flourish. And nagging, reminding, and lecturing are at the top of the list in terms of parenting strategies. So I knew that I was going to make the problem worse if I depended on all of those strategies. So I spent a lot of time thinking about, well, if not that, then what?
Yeah.
How am I going to raise kids who are cooperative, respectful, contributing, capable, compassionate, flexible, resilient people if I can't just wag my finger at them and tell them that that's who they should be?
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of years thinking about all the ways that a parent could accomplish that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so all of that's condensed into your two books that you've written.
Yes.
Um, let's talk about the books a bit. And one of the things I noticed, particularly in the duct tape book, is you've got lots of examples, sort of like little scenarios that parents are likely to face. And so I want you to feel free to throw in here any examples that you have or scenarios or even recollections from your own parenting experience. And I'm assuming that your kids turned out well.
5 out of 5 are all high functioning. They're out on their own. They're in college or graduated from college. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Good
worked.
for you.
It's worked fairly well for us.
Good
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I especially like the title of the first book, Duct Tape Parenting. And of course, duct tape is so useful for everything.
Everything.
and and the cover illustration was very neat. It shows kind of 1950s style parents with duct tape over their mouth. So what are you getting at with that